Welcome for today's science lesson. We had promised that we shall continue with the levels of classification, and we are saying that the kingdom, when we are classifying the kingdom, is the first level of classification. The second level of classification is the phyla. And the phyla is for the animal kingdom, but if we are talking about plant kingdom, it will not be phyla, but in this case it will be division. If we are trying to classify plants, if it is in plant kingdom, it will be division. So we are saying that the second level, the phyla, in singular is the phylum, and in plant kingdom, phylum is not there, but instead we have divisions. So from the kingdom, when we move from the first level of the kingdom, we shall go to the phylum or division. Then from the phyla or division, the third level that the divisions are divided into classes. Then from classes, we shall go downwards to another group called the order. Then the orders are divided further into families. Then the families are again subdivided further into genera. We say genus, that is singular, but in plural is the genera. Genera, that is in plural. Then from genera, then we go to the species. We say up here we have the kingdom. Then from the kingdom, we have the phyla or division if it's in case of plants, then classes, the order, families, then the genera, and then species. We are going to have this structural representation of these levels of classification. Then after having the structure representation of these levels of classification, which we use them for identifying different organisms, we shall pick examples from the animal kingdom, and then we shall classify a particular organism in the animal kingdom. Then also we shall pick examples from the plant kingdom. Then we shall also classify those organisms in these levels. Maybe we can have a structural representation of what these classifications are. And we know that when we are trying to classify particular organisms, we use the last two levels, the lowest levels being the one for species and the other one for the genus or the genera. That's how we use them. We can have our kingdom here. Then we had said below the kingdom, we have the phylum. And we said phylum, in case of plants, we say it's division. Among the plant kingdom is division. And then after the phylum, we have the class. Then below the class, we have the order. Then below the order, we have the family. Then below family, we have the genus. Then below the genus, we have the species. Now, to have a structural representation of what this is, we can have is such structure that will show the levels of classification. We'd say the first level is the kingdom is the highest, followed by division or phylum. Then the order will follow. So what happens? What happens? We see that organisms become more alike as you go down these levels. Become more alike. So we say the organisms become more alike as you go down. They try to resemble. For instance, organisms that are present in this level, these lowest level species, they resemble one another, but they are not exactly replica. For instance, if we say human beings are of the same species, but if you look individuals in streets that are walking or in a class, your classmate, yes, you belong to the same species, but of course you have been identified as Homo sapiens, Homo being the genus and then sapiens being the species, but you don't look alike completely, though you belong to the same species and everything. So we are saying when you are coming down, coming from up, you're going down, the organisms tend to resemble each other. We are saying organisms of the same species are most similar, but not identical. They are not identical. When you look at the people around us, they will resemble us, but they will not be exactly like us. We want to have an effective way that can assist you when you want to know the classes, the kingdom, and so forth. We can say we can look at the way we can construct another simple way of knowing all these kingdoms. How will you know that you have the uppermost level is the kingdom, phylum, followed by class, order, and so forth? There is a way we can easily know this, constructing constructing no, yes, but when you construct mnemonic, if you construct a mnemonic, what is this mnemonic? We are told a mnemonic is a way of helping one to remember a list of things. Constructing a mnemonic. We are saying constructing a mnemonic is a system whereby you will be assisted to remember a number of things. You are assisted to remember a list of things. For instance, if we want to remember all this, we are going to see how we can solve it. For instance, if we are asked to construct a mnemonic to remember the order of groups of biological classifications, like what we have been doing here, these biological classifications where we classify organisms from above the kingdom, the phyla, the class, the order, the families as we go downwards. So we shall say what can allow our memory to remember very well. Then if we know how we can construct a mnemonic, then we can be able to remember these levels easily. For instance, if we write, we can give an example of maybe here we have a kingdom. we want to give an example, a way how you can construct a mnemonic. You can have a kingdom here. Then the kingdom is followed by the phyla. If in case you want to place a particular organism, an animal, for instance, then from the phyla we have a class. Then from the class we have the order. Then from the order we have family. Then we have the genus, and then species. Now, when you are constructing a mnemonic, this is what you can do. Now, when you're constructing a mnemonic, what you have to pick from the order of these levels from the kingdom phyla, you pick the first letter, and when you pick the first letter, you can formulate sentences. When you formulate sentences, it can become easier for you to remember the order of these levels. For instance, if you pick from the kingdom, you pick the word, the letter K, and you have your word in your sentence, keep. Then from the word, the phylum, you pick the letter P, then you say keep placing. You pick the P, you write the word keep placing. Then from the word class, you can pick letter C, and you have keep placing another word here, cake. Keep placing cake. Then from the word order, you can pick letter O, and you write keep placing orders. You will find that you are constructing a sentence that is logical, and it will be easier for you. As long as you remember that sentence, then you can come up and write all the levels that you wanted to classify that particular organism into. So from the word family, you will pick letter F. So you will say keep placing cake orders for. So you have picked where F is from, and then from the word genus, from the genus you pick letter G, and you can write order for good. You can formulate the word good, and then the word species, you can pick letter S, and you formulate a word students. So you can find, by constructing a simple sentence in English, keep placing cake orders for good students. When you have such a sentence, keep placing cake orders for good students, you actually can be able to remember all the levels of classifications from the kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species, the genera. So you remember them easily if you pick the first letters and you construct a sentence. There's also another way where you can use acronyms if you want to know long words and you want to shorten them for your memory. You can pick acronyms whereby you look the words and then you shorten them. I'll just give an example of maybe if you are talking of anthropods, we know anthropods are a group of animals. They have their characteristics. We have insects belonging to anthropods. For instance, if you have an insect and you are told to name the parts of the front leg of the front appendages of an insect or a grasshopper, you can come up with an acronym. You say cotrofetitaclo. What we are saying, this one can cotrofetitaclo, that is just you have picked the first letters of every the first letters of every word, so that now when you want to name the parts of the hind appendages of a grasshopper, you can say co is a coxa, tro becomes the trochanter, and then femur, that's a part, T becomes tibia, then that one becomes the tarsus, then glandular parts, the claw. You will have named all parts of that particular appendages or the particular leg of a grasshopper and so forth. And this one, you are only picking the acronyms, the first words of that particular part, you pick it and then you formulate a word, you formulate the word cotra, fe, titaclo. Then from it you can easily remember what you wanted. Now, we were trying to get a solution on how we can be able to remember all these levels of classifications, and that's why we came up with an idea. They came up with an idea of a mnemonic. Mnemonic is a way where you pick the first letters of the levels, of different levels, and you formulate such a sentence as we have it here. Now, we want to deal with the classification of animals within the Australian country, how the Europeans came, the first Europeans came, and when they landed, they almost classified each animal that they came across. So classification of Australian organisms. Yes, classification of Australian organisms, and when we shall be doing this, we shall try to classify not only the organisms that are found in the plant kingdom, we shall also look at the organisms that are found in the animal kingdom. We see how they were trying to classify them. But the history behind the classification, we are told when the Europeans came, when the European scientists came, they tried as much as possible to describe any named plant they came across, any named living organism they came across. They tried as much as possible to describe it and to give it a name. So we are told the scientists, the taxonomists, have given all the Australian species scientific names. They were able to give all the Australian species scientific names, meaning they gave them names that cannot change whichever way, whatever way, or in whatever region. And an example of how they did this classification, we are told of the red kangaroo, the eastern grey kangaroo, and the commonly known the wallaroo. They have similar characteristics in common, and it is reflected in the classification as we are going to see. We shall try to see how we can classify these three kangaroos that look alike, that is the eastern kangaroo, the grey kangaroo, and the common wallaroo. We want to classify them. They belong to the same genera. They are in the same genera, they are in the same kingdom, they are in the same class, they are in the same phylum, in the same order, but we shall see what we can do when we want to classify them. So we can say, observe the following examples. Observe the following examples. Observe the following examples of animal classification. Yes, we can start by having the common name. So in our classification structure, we can have the common name, then the eastern kangaroo, we write our eastern kangaroo there. Then we can write our common wallaroo. Yes, the common wallaroo, we can have it there. Then from the common names, the common name is the kangaroo. We have another common name of, we have a common name here, eastern kangaroo, and we have the common name of the wallaroo. All these are kinds of types of kangaroos, but we want to see their kingdoms and the phylum and so forth. So we can have the kingdom here. Then from the kingdom we have the phylum. Then from the phylum we have the class. Then from the class we have the order. Then from the order we have the family. Then from the family we go down, we get the genus, and then lastly we have a description of species. Wanted to know whether we can have another word. I don't want to be down. If you got down, do not be seen. But we shall bring this other up. These are the levels of classification. Now, we want to see how we can classify the eastern kangaroo and the common kangaroo. Now, when we start with the kingdom, they all belong to a kingdom called animal. They belong to a kingdom with the animal kingdom, so we can write animal here. We say the eastern kangaroo belong to a kingdom called animal. The same with the common wallaroo, it also belongs to the same animal. So both are in the animal kingdom. When we come to the phylum, they all belong to the phylum Chordates. They both belong to the phylum Chordates. Yes. So we can see they all belong to the phylum Chordates. Then when we go to the class, they also belong to the same class. The class is called the mammals. They belong to the class mammals. Then when we come to the order, they also happen to belong to the same order called Diprotodon. They all belong to the same order called Diprotodon. Then when we come to the family, they all belong to the same family, micropods. They all belong to the family, the micropod. And when we come to the genera, they also happen to be in the same genera. Yes, the genera is Micropas. They happen, or both of them to happen to be in the same genera Micropas. Both belong to Micropas. But now when it comes to the description of the species, we find Gigantes. It is the first one, the eastern kangaroo. It belongs to, the species is Gigantes. And when we go to Robustus, to this common wallaroo is Robustus. So we find the differing when it comes to species. Now, what now becomes relevant here is, what about now the scientific name? Scientific name. So we find that to get the scientific name, we pick the generic name and we add the species name. For instance, this one, now the scientific name for eastern kangaroo will be Micropas gigantes. That will be scientific name for eastern kangaroo, and the scientific name for the common wallaroo, it will be Micropas robustus. Those I can write those names below. This the scientific name. The scientific name for the eastern kangaroo now will be, first we start with the genera, micro, and we start with the capital letter, Micropas gigantes. That will be the name for eastern kangaroo, and the name for this other common wallaroo, it will be Micropas robustus. Micropas robustus. Yes. Now, what we are saying, this is the scientific name. The scientific name, we use the lowest level of classification. We use the genera and the species. Genera being the first one, and then species the second. Genera being the first one, Micropas, and then the species follows, Robustus. So we can find that when you compare the eastern kangaroo and water wallaroo, the common wallaroo, all of them, they belong to the same animal kingdom. They belong to the phylum Chordates. They belong to the same class, the mammals. They are in the same order, Diprotodon. They are also in the same family, Micropod. They also happen to be in the same genera, Micropas. But when it comes to description of species, this is where they are differentiated. This was an example from an animal classification. We can see other animals also before we look into another example where we are going to see the plants. Let us observe now. We see an example of another classification. We classify other organisms that happens to be in the same animal kingdom, and we see where and how we can see their differences. We can have, and we can have the common name. We have our common name, and then we have red-bellied snake. The red-bellied snake. We shall compare two organisms, red-bellied snake and also the funnel web spider. Then we shall try to see how we can classify the red-bellied snake and the funnel web spider, where the difference emerges. we can have from the highest classification level, we have the kingdom. From the kingdom, we have the phyla. Then from the phylum, we have the class. We have the order. Then we have the family. From the family, we have the genus. Then from the genus, description of species. Description of species. Then from description of species, then we can lastly end with the scientific name. We can have such columns for classification. If we shift to plant kingdom, then the second class phylum will change to division. Other levels will remain the same. And now, we are now trying to classify the red-bellied snake and the spider. Or when it comes to the kingdom, they all belong to the same kingdom called animal. They belong to the same kingdom of animals, the spider and the red-bellied snake. When we go to the phylum, this one, the red-bellied snake belongs to the chordates. That's the snake. This one, the spider web, it belongs to arthropod. Arthropod, yes. It belongs to arthropod. So we can see on the phylum, they don't belong to the same phylum. It's different. And then when we go to the class, this one belongs to Reptilia. It is in the class of the reptiles, the Reptilia. And when we go to our spider belongs to Arachnida. The arachnid, it belongs to class of arachnid. And when we go to the order is the order is Squamata. The order for the red-bellied snake is Squamata. And when we go to the order of the spider is Aranae. The order is Aranae. And when we come to the family, Elabidae, it belongs to a family called Elabidae. That is the red-bellied snake belongs to a family called Elabidae. And when you go to funnel web spider, it belongs to another family called It's called Hexatheloidea. Hexatheloidea. And then when we come to the genera is the genera for the snake is Pseudichas, that is the genera. And when you go to the genera of the spider is Atrax. Now, we have seen that they are having different classes right from after the animal kingdom. When you start coming from the phylum below, they belong to a very different class. The orders are different, the families are different, the genera are different. What about the description? When you come to the description of the snake is Porphyriacus, that is the description. And when you go to the spider belongs to, it is described as robustus. Now, when we want to get now our scientific name, we shall say the scientific name for the red snake is Pseudichis porphyriacus, and the scientific name for the spider will be Atrax robustus. So we can write the scientific names in such a way. Pseudichis porphyriacus. That is the scientific name for the red bellied snake, and the scientific name for the funnel web spider will be Atrax robustus. So this is how now we get the scientific name for the two. The examples we have seen so far, they belong to the animal kingdom. Maybe we can go to an example where we can have an example of classification among the plants, not animals, and we see what happens. We said very few changes. Maybe there will be a change in terms of the phyla. The phyla will change in that order. So we can have, if it's the plant, we shall have the common name. Then from the common name, then we shall go to the kind of a plant we want to identify. And this time we want to identify Sydney blue gum. Sydney blue gum. We want to classify it together with another plant called gray iron bark. So we shall have our kingdom. We can have our kingdom. Then after kingdom, we shall not have the phylum, but instead we shall have the division. Then from the division, we shall have the class, and so forth. So we can maintain these lines. However, the characteristics that are within here are for animals. So we want to get the correct classes for the plants. So we can still have our table for classification. Now, when we are trying to classify the two types of trees, the Sydney blue gum and the gray ironbark, they both belong they belong to the same kingdom, and that is the plant kingdom. So the Sydney blue gum is in the plant kingdom. The gray ironbark is also in the plant kingdom. So we can have it like so. Now, when it comes to divisions, they happen to belong also to the same division, Magnoleobita, Magnolephyta. They belong in the same division, Magnolephyta, yes. Magnoleophyta. Then when it comes to the class from the divisions, they belong to the same class, Magnolepsida. They belong in the same class, Magnolepsida. And then when it comes to the order, Meerkats, they belong to the same order. They belong to the same order. Martels. They belong to the same order, Martels. When it comes to the family, they belong also to the same family. Metaceae. Yes, they belong to the same family, Metaceae. When it comes to the genera, these trees, yes, they belong also to the same genera, which is Eucalyptus. They belong to the same genera, Eucalyptus. When now it comes to description of the species, is where we get a different, they belong to different species. This one is Saligna. It is the species Saligna, while the other one is Paniculata. So we are seeing that when we are classifying these two types of plants, they have only been classified into different species, but up to genera, they belong to the same genera, Eucalyptus. But when it comes to description of species, then we see that the blue gum belongs to Saligna, while the gray ironbark belongs to Paniculata. Now, when it comes to writing of the scientific name, we use the genera name followed by the species being the last. So when it comes to writing the scientific name for the Sydney blue gum, we shall start with the Eucalyptus. We start with the capital letter U, Eucalyptus. Followed by another name starts with a small letter. So Eucalyptus saligna. Then this one will be Eucalyptus paniculata. Paniculata. Yes, paniculata. Paniculata, Eucalyptus paniculata. So we can see that writing a scientific name is a combination of the genera and the species, the genera and the species. So when we do this, we have successfully classified the Sydney blue gum and the gray ironbark into their correct levels of classification. And when we identify them by the scientific name, the biological name, the scientific name Eucalyptus saligna, it is the only plant that is known by that name, and no any other plant is known with such a name. We can see that when we are trying to classify these trees, they only differed when it came to to the species, but in all other levels they belonged to the same levels, whether it was a division, the class, the order were the same. We can see another example. We can see another example, and it will be the last example before we embark on something small. So the other example that we can classify other plants apart from this, we see how the difference they will bring in. We have Wolemi pine. We have a tree called Wolemi pine. We want to classify the Wolemi pine and also the lacy tree fern. So we have the Wolemi pine and the lacy tree pine. We shall see the differences that will emerge when we are when we are classifying them in their correct levels of classification. Now, we shall classify the Wolemi pine and lacy tree fern. We see what happens. One, these are plants, so when it comes to kingdom, they belong to the same plant kingdom. So we can find when it comes to the highest level, they're in the plant kingdom. When we go to the divisions, they differ. These are Pinophyta on the divisions. On the division, the Wolemi pine is in the Pinophyta division. The other one is in the Pteridophyta. It belongs to Pteridophyta. That is the class that have differed on the divisions. When we go to the class, Pinopsida, it belongs to the Wolemi pine tree, Pinopsida. It belongs to Pinopsida class. And when you go to when we go to the lesser tree fern, it belongs to Pteridopsida. Pteridopsida. And then when it comes to the orders, we find that Pinales, order that one is Pinales. That is the order. When you go to the order of the other one, it's also different. They differ. They are in the order of Senathelis. When it comes to the families, their families are not the same. This one belongs to the family of Araucariae, Riaceae. The family is Araucariaceae, and when you go to the family of the lesser tree fern, it belongs to the family of It belongs to the family of Sinatheaceae, so their families are different. Then when we come to the genus, the genera, this one belongs to the Wolemi. It belongs to the Wolemi when it comes to the genera. The other one belongs to Sadae. Yes, Sadae. Sadea. So that is the family. Now, the description of the species, they also differ. Nobilis, this one belongs to a species called Nobilis, while this one belongs to the species called Cooperi. So when it comes to scientific name for these two plants, we shall pick the first, the genera Wolemi nobilis. Wolemi nobilis, that's the scientific name for Wolemi pine. And when it comes to lacy tree fern, we shall pick the Cadea cooperi. That is the scientific name for lacy tree fern. We have given these examples on how we classify. We shall like to, when we are approaching the end, we shall say this is modern way of classifying and naming organisms. But we also have the indigenous way of naming such organisms. So we believe when we are there, we should try to see how indigenous people that were found in Australia, how they were carrying out their naming and so forth. But so in our next lesson, we shall be covering the indigenous classification. After when we are through with the indigenous classification, we shall compare the indigenous classification and modern classification. We see how indigenous people of Australia were trying to classify the organisms that were around them, what process they used to classify, to group the animals that were within the environment, and then we shall try to compare it with the modern scientific way of classifying organisms within the environment. We see the differences and then we see the similarities. That is the end of the lesson today.